foster, kinship, adoption. Welcome to CareCast, the podcast for anyone called to care, whether you're navigating kinship care, stepping into foster care, or walking through the joys and complexities of adoption, you are in the right place. Encouragement, real talk, and lasting hope. This is a space to be encouraged, inspired, and reminded that you are never alone. Each week, we bring real stories from real people, caregivers, experts, agency and community leaders, dedicated volunteers, as well as those who've walked this journey firsthand. Because when we take time to hold stories with compassion, courage, and community, we all grow stronger. My name is Nancy Weinstein, and I am your host. Join us as we hold space for the hearts behind the hard work and the children who need us most. Welcome to CareCast. I am also, I guess, the guest today. So I do my little intro. I know I should have it memorized. I do not. So I read it so I know I get it all out. But one day I'll have it memorized. But I'm here with my friends, my colleagues, and I'll go around the room. Lani Barnes, Executive Director of Restoration 225. Pastor Logan Mabe. What's your official title here with Restoration 25?
Deputy Executive Director, and so that means that I'm the sidekick.
All right, we'll get more to that later. And then Emily Tupta, and you are?
The Church Engagement Specialist and Regional Manager.
Excellent, excellent. So I have my friends and colleagues here today, but the microphone is going to be turned around. Usually I'm the one asking questions and listening and following up, and also my colleagues do the same thing. But today I am also going to be interviewed. So I'm just going to put my little laptop over here and see what y'all have for me today.
Well, I want to start by saying this is a unique experience today because we've been doing this series and this podcast. And if we were to title this message, this podcast would be called This Is Us, the story of Nancy. And so you've got a really unique journey in being adopted and then being a foster parent and then an adoptive mother, and now an advocate at Restoration 225. And so I just want to begin by asking a little bit about your story. Share a little bit about your story to begin, starting with your life as an adopted kid.
Sure. I feel like we should have that sequence where it goes, and going back and you see little Nancy walking around. But, my journey in this space with adoption and thinking about foster care and thinking about the vulnerable child, it started with myself. I was that vulnerable child. My biological mother was 17 years old when she had me. I have never met her. I don't know her name, but I am forever grateful for the fact that she kept me. And placed me for adoption. I don't know if she was encouraged to do so. I don't know. I don't know any of the story, but I do know that I was given an opportunity that others don't always have. And so I was placed for adoption, and my parents, who adopted me, and I just call them my parents. I don't call them my adoptive parents or anything like that. They were looking to adopt a baby. They had adopted my older brother, and they were looking to adopt again. And so my mom always told me the story was that, they found an adoption agency in New York, and they told them a little bit about what they hoped to find, boy, girl, it didn't matter. And I was placed in their arms a number of months and, I guess evaluations later, right? So it's very different now how adoptions work, but I was adopted in 1975. And so it was closed adoption, so there wasn't any real exchange between the person placing the baby for adoption and the family choosing for adoption. So all I have been given is some medical information, but other than that, I don't have much. I did try to contact the adoption agency, and they said that I could leave my name and this was years ago now, leave my name and phone number, and that if my biological mother did express interest, then at that time, but that my information would be given to her. But that has not happened. So that's kind of where my journey in this space of understanding what does it mean, because I was actually fostered for a short period of time. For about 3 months, I was placed in the care of someone who knew they would not keep me forever. And my mom didn't really even share. Again, when I say my mom, I'm talking about the woman who cared for me all of my life. I'll use the term biological mom if I'm trying just to let listeners know. But my mom, told me much later in life, in fact, after I had fostered and adopted, and we'll get to that part of my life later, but she's like, I guess I've never shared this story with you. When I went and I picked you up, the foster mom, she cried and she cried and she cried, giving me away. She'd only taken care of me for 3 months, but she had bonded with me. She loved me. She fed me through the middle of the night. I'm sure comforted me during crying spats and all of these things. And so, and my mom said, and it made her cry to see how much I was loved. And so grateful that someone had loved and cared for me during that time. And it made me cry because when my mom shared that with me, I had already done that with some children that we had chosen to foster, and I had to let them go as well. And so I was thinking, wow, this is a very full circle moment, because I didn't know that woman had felt that way about me, and really was my first mother. So there's so much to this story. I can continue, but that's kind of the beginning of my journey in this space.
I love that. We say oftentimes at Restoration 225 that everyone can do something. And while often, if you've watched any of these episodes so far, you've seen us bring on church advocates, and we've talked about Care Portal and our 4 ways to get involved. And there's so many lanes that you can run in to serve and to help families in crisis, in vulnerable spaces, from at-risk moms who have not yet lost children and maybe stepping into the prevention space, all the way up to the deep end of the pool, which is becoming a foster parent. But we do believe that part of this journey is for some of those people to step in and say yes to taking kids into their homes. And like you, at some point saying yes to having not just a foster child, but saying yes to an adoptive child who'd be your forever kid. So tell us a little bit about your life today, your family, your husband, your kids, and that journey of foster care to where you are right now.
Well, for me, adoption was just something I knew. So my 3 brothers were adopted. I was adopted. So growing up, to say that I was adopted was encouraged. It was known, and my siblings were adopted. So it wasn't foreign to me to say that. Although there were times in school where there might be things where they go into background and history of biology and how did you get your eye color and how did you get this? And I'd be like, I don't know.
Right.
So, and I think anybody who has adopted a child has experienced that in their education as well, because there are times where people start asking questions, right? And so that part of my journey, really, even when I started dating seriously, every person I would date seriously, I would say, are you open to adoption? Because I knew I wanted to adopt one day, or at least foster, get involved with a child who is in need. And so my husband was so gracious and like, okay, we'll go to the first meeting, but I'm kind of nervous about this.
Now, real quick, was that like a first date question?
Like, was that over coffee?
Was it like if it's in your mind, I just want to know, like, did you go on the date anticipating say, hey, listen, before we get to date number 2, I need to know if you're willing to adopt a child. And you're thinking, that's a lot of pressure for a guy.
It might not have been date number 2, but it wasn't that long, honestly. Because I mean, once, David and I were dating seriously enough to be talking about marriage, that it probably came up around then. And I said, well, hey, listen, just wondering. And he's like, well, I would be open to it. I've never really thought about it. Most people it's just not been something that they think about prior to actually being married and maybe even having a child or trying to have a child. But for me, it was something from my very beginning that I had always thought about. When I was taking care of my baby dolls, I would be like, we're going to bring you home. It wasn't always like I birthed the baby. Maybe that was this doll, but not that doll,
Right.
So it was equal opportunity how the children came into your
dollhouse.
Into my dollhouse, yes, in my care. Because that was normal to me in my home. Yeah. But David was open to it, and so then we found Angels Foster Family Network out here in San Diego, and we began that journey of fostering, and we ultimately fostered 3 children, and one of whom ended up being our forever son.
That's amazing. I'm going to ask you a real quick question, and we said this earlier offline, but what in your mind so far has been a word or a phrase that encompasses the journey that you've been on? That's a big one. You got to think about it a little bit. I'm knocking mics around here, but
I know.
we're getting animated here with our team. And what's something that you think that, man, it could even be a scripture or something that comes to mind that's really
I don't know if
embodied
this is the one word, but the word that keeps coming to mind is encouragement or encouraging, because I feel like there are times where I have needed to be encouragement to others. There are times that I have needed to be encouraged or be the encourager. So all the forms. I'm a elementary school teacher, so all the forms of the word. But truly, just God has encouraged me. People in my life have been mentors to me, and therefore I have been able to encourage those. So when we were in the foster care space and I was meeting with the biological moms who were really, and dads who were trying to get their lives on the path in order to get their child back in their care, I had to be that encourager. I had to provide the encouragement. But then I was encouraged by them when I saw them taking the steps to do the things that they needed to do in order to get their child back. So just that word, but every form of that word. And sometimes it's applied to me, and sometimes it's what I was giving to somebody else.
And that's absolutely biblical, because you think about the scripture, comfort with the comfort you've been comforted with. You were comforted. And so then because of that, you have an empathy and an outward focus. Your whole life, you've had this drive and this goal because of the comfort you received. Then you were able to comfort others and go, hey, I did it. You can do it. I'm going to walk alongside you. And that's totally biblical. I love that.
No, totally. And I really think it always goes back. I always want to give honor and respect to the biological mother that had the courage to give me up, right? And live that life without me caring for me. Anybody who has been a parent can only imagine what that might have felt like. And I have sat in that space. Oftentimes during my birthday, people say, oh, let's go out. My birthday for me is a very solemn event. It's not that I'm sad. It's that it's honoring what was done that day. What she went through that day. I honor her on that day. I also honor the parents that adopted me. I honor the fact that that I could not be here, that another choice could have been made. And so for me, that's something that it goes back to that. What I've been given, I now can give to others. So it started from God, who I believe honored and gave encouragement and love to my parents, who then were able to give it to me, and I believe even give it to my biological mom, who may not have felt it in all the ways we would hope she would have felt it, but somewhere along the way I hope that she did. And it is one of my greatest wishes. I wish I could connect with her simply to say thank you. I don't know that she needs to know everything about my life, and maybe I don't need to know everything about her life, but I would love, as one mother to another, to say, your sacrifice was probably the greatest sacrifice that any woman has to make, I think, in life, is giving up a child. And that gave me my life, and that I was okay, and that I was loved. Because you don't know. I know the end of the story. I know where I am today. She doesn't know.
Right.
Or my biological father. I speak a lot about my biological mother, but my biological father, I'd feel the same way. I don't know anything about him either. So other than, background information.
I think this is so good. I think that very few people that I know have the kind of perspective that you've had. Everybody has different experiences through adoption or foster care or life. And I'm just so encouraged. Many of us up here, we all have been impacted by foster care in some way, whether we just stepped in as advocates or we've taken in family members. 3 of us right now have fostered and adopted children. And so the perspective that you hold is one that we all hope that our kids have too. And something that I think we encourage our kids, we pray for birth parents. That's sometimes a little uncomfortable, but it's also something that's so good, and I think healing for our kids, and having the kind of dialogue that you've had and that your parents had with you. I love that adoption was not such a strange word and uncommon conversation in your home, but it was just something normal. And we want to normalize that conversation around schools and churches and youth and the next generation and families, to say, like, this is not a weird thing. And but I love that so much, the perspective that you have. And I think that I'm encouraged to know that God used so many people, your birth mom, in the story. And the woman for a few months had a monumental role in keeping you safe and loved, and then your parents who've raised you. And so we say everyone can do something, but there's a lot of people in all of our stories that we don't always recognize that impact our lives in huge ways. And so I'm going to hand off some questions to Emily now and let her ask you a little bit about life as we are today.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad that you brought up that the three of you have walked the foster and adoptive journey, because as somebody who came into this with absolutely zero clue about any of it, I just wanted to bring meals and help families in my community. And I had no idea what I was stepping into. And so for me, it took a lot of trial by fire and a lot of professional training too, of learning about trauma, about learning about this space and what that looks like, and family and dynamics and all of that. And so, but it's something that you lived. It's something that was your experiential knowledge that came with deciding to say yes on behalf of a child and stepping into their story. And so my question for you is, fostering and adoption often bring up complex emotions. What have you learned about grief, attachment, or healing along the way?
Such an important part of this story, of my story, and I think every child who is a child of adoption, and fostering and kinship care and anything that is outside my mom and dad had me and raised me, right? And there, from the very moment that you are removed, whether it's through fostering situation or adoption, there is a tear in what should have been, right? What is typically done. And so although I was an infant and I don't have any cognitive memory of that moment, there are things that I have had to battle with because of that. And it doesn't mean that my parents that adopted me did anything wrong. It simply is an identity, right? So growing up, the way I kind of moved into that was I wanted to be perfect. I didn't want my parents to have to worry about anything, because in the back of my mind, and please know, my parents didn't do anything to cause this, create this, make me feel this. They were wonderful. And loving and caring and all of the things you want a parent to be. But simply because I knew that I didn't start with them, that someone had given me away for good, right? In a good, honest way. But as a child, all you hear is, well, that mom couldn't keep you. Those parents couldn't keep you, so you were given away. So I owned that by saying I could be given away again. If I make a mistake, if I am not good enough, if I don't get good grades, if I don't follow all the rules, if I'm not type A enough, because that's really what I became, was very type A, because I wanted to make everything pleasant and happy and make it worth that they chose me. And that's a heavy thing for a kid to carry. I don't think I even understood that till I was older, as we often do, and you go back.
Right.
Because even my husband would say, remember when we first started dating and maybe a few months in, 6 months in, you would say, do you really love me? Or once you start saying I love you, maybe it wasn't 6 months in. It's been 25 years of marriage now, so maybe it was after you.
Second date, you're asking if you're going to foster and adopt.
We're back.
Now 6 months, you're just dropping the L word. Man.
So maybe it was later that, but my recollection, forgive me on that. But whenever we started saying that, I'd be like, so do you really love me? What do you love about me? And it wasn't until many years later I realized why I was always asking that, because it was unfathomable to me. I think I didn't even understand this really, that someone would want to love me forever other than maybe the parents that did choose me, right? So you're going to love me forever? You really want to get married to me? You really how much do you love me? Now, I've since stopped annoying him with that question. But one day he was just why do you ask me that all the time? And I had to really sit and think why I was always asking that. And I thought everybody asked that, right? No, that is not normal. He's like, do I ask you all the time if you love me? I know you love me. I know you love me through your actions and your words. And I don't have to keep proving that to you. So there are pieces to that story that come through, that the fact that you didn't get to stay with your biological family, that come through and have been woven through my story. But it has made me, I think, a better parent. for both my biological kids as well as, we adopted our son and fostered him and the children that we fostered. I think it's given me an interesting perspective on understanding that there are wounds that sometimes we are not aware of, but we can honor them by recognizing that they exist.
Nancy, if I could just say, I really appreciate you saying that, because I know that sometimes I'll call you and I'll go, you know what, can you give me this perspective? Because my son, who we adopted as well, he does that. He probably asks me 20 times a day. It's going to make me cry. Welcome to this podcast where we cry, right? Where he's always needing that assurance, right? And so just even listening to you, and I've known you for a long time, sharing that perspective, I really appreciate that so much. And I love that question. Go ahead and continue.
I have another question for you. What do you wish more people understood about children and teens in the foster care system? You said it's not just the boy you have, but that it was quite a journey, and several children have been in your home.
Yes. So we fostered a little boy, and then we fostered a little girl. The little boy wasn't in our home very long, but any child that comes in your home makes an imprint on your family, makes an imprint on your heart and your mind, and so I think about him all of the time. I used to keep in touch with his mom and be able to keep up with her. We've lost touch a little bit recently, but I would say our second child, we've had the most contact. So she came into our home and was in our home for about 14 or 15 months. From birth. But our journey with her family, even though they moved away from San Diego, she was reunified with her biological parents, and we cheered that on, and we're so thankful for that, and continue to cheer them on today. And so I know if she's listening, Heather, I know I'm supposed to come visit. I know you want me to visit, and I will visit. So that's her mom. And the beauty of being able to have both experiences. So I have my own personal experience, but then I've also had this experience with a child that I did return. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it or lie that was easy for our family. My girls, we wrapped our arms around each other, my daughters and my husband, and we were crying because we knew we were going to miss her, right? And we had loved her for, better part of over a year. And so it was all of a sudden your house is empty. But, asking for advice on to those that find themselves, the children, they just want, to speak for them, I guess I would say they want to be loved, right? They want someone who, if the opportunity is there to open their home, that someone will, and someone will advocate for them, and someone will root for them. And sometimes we all know, sometimes that is just serving the family, right? Like we do with certain care portal requests where you're just delivering items to the family. When I say just, that's a big deal. Mm-hmm. But you deliver it, and you then are a sounding board or a support to that family. It can be something like that. Or it can be all the way down where you then have the child in your home for an extended period of time, and up until, even adoption. So I guess I would say from my perspective, even when I was a little baby, I just wanted someone to say yes, right? Mm-hmm. To say yes, like I needed someone to care for me, and someone did. Mm-hmm. And so that really continues to be in my mind is like, how can I serve? How can I help? How can I encourage others? Because I know Lani and I used to have this conversation all the time. How can we get more families to foster?
Right.
And then we realized, although we were ready to jump into the deep end, maybe that makes us weird. I don't know. We were ready to big waves. Yeah, let's do that. No problem. We barely are making, our heads above water. So we did that. We jumped into the foster care and then eventually adoption. But not every family's ready to do that. And we recognize that. And so we said we have to go back upstream. Mm-hmm. And some families are ready to say, hey, I will buy the diapers. Mm-hmm. I will buy the car seat. I will buy the stroller. They're not even ready to go make the delivery. Other families are ready to say, oh, I'll knock on this stranger's door and I will deliver the item. Mm-hmm. And I will sit and get to know that family. And maybe I'll provide ongoing support, or maybe we become, a group of friends, right? Because it starts with supporting, but I always like to say we're not saviors. We are just, but for the grace of God go I. Mm-hmm. And so I'm helping you at this moment in your crisis, but maybe there's somewhere. And I found that too. Heather, I'll give you another shout out. We've been on the phone or I've texted her and she has helped to support me. And she was the bio parent to one of the kiddos I took care of. That now over the years, I started as a support network for her and encourager to her. But eventually it's grown into, a friendship. And then when you're friends, there's back and forth support. So I think there's a really long continuum of how we can all jump into this space. But I always say each one of us can do something. And that's where that's why I'm here today. That's why I work at Restoration 225, because I want to encourage more people to know that they can do something. And every bit of it might be just financing the need, right? I'm going to take that all day. You want to buy a bunch of car seats for us? Fantastic. We can get them to the families that need them.
Yeah.
So, and then everything in between, and everybody has a role.
Yeah. And what I'm hearing really is every step requires courage, because it takes courage for you to tell your story. It takes courage for someone to say yes. It takes courage for someone to get the training to go knock on a door. It takes courage to take in a child even for a weekend, or to say, I'm going to foster, I'm going to adopt, because you're opening up your heart for hurt. All of it takes courage, because at any point things could go sideways.
Right.
Yeah, and let me speak to that. Even adoption. A lot of times, and I know Lani and Logan and I have had this conversation as parents who have adopted children and parenting them. Everyone thinks, the adoption, yay! It's all yes, yay, yes, that's all wonderful. But there's a journey just with raising any child. But a child from a tough beginning, a child who has memories that aren't the ones you wish they had. And these are memories that they may not even be able to call up and talk to you about. Like, they can't bring them out, but they're there. They're in their brains. And so there are moments and difficulties that every person faces, whether they are the adoptive parent, whether they are the biological parent, whether they are the person coming and knocking on the door. There's those feelings. And there's times where, like, I can't do this. Everybody feels that, right? But
Girl, I birthed all three of my babies, and there are days where I'm like, Lord, I cannot do this in the pickup line. So yes, there are a lot of those moments just in life. Yeah.
And so I know we support one another and we support you. And that's really what we're calling families to do today, is say, is there something in what we say on one of our podcasts where you feel like, I think my family, myself, we could do that, And then you just step into that.
I'm going to ask you a quick question too, because we've talked about this a lot and we have the opportunity to talk about it today, which is the emotional well-being of kids. And I think that as we've had a lot of conversations, one of the things I've learned from you is just that every kid is different in how you handle them, whether it's biological kids or adoptive kids. All of our kids, things come out in different ways at different times. There's different triggers that because there's different beginnings, questions, identity issues, like you shared about yourselves, and just how you've navigated parenting all three of your kids in different ways, and how you talk to them. I think, what is the transition you've seen take place in your life, in your heart, through this journey of different kids with different emotions?
Sure. That's a great question. And I also want to say, just for the podcast too, that, I'm using these terms, my adopted son, my biological daughters. I do not use those words. Like, that is not terminology we use in our home. But I just want to put that out there. But for the course of this conversation, it's important to do so you understand. But, parenting, we all know, anybody who's been a parent, it is a journey. And that journey will humble you in moments that in ways that you never thought possible. It doesn't matter what child you're raising. But I often say, I have a degree in education. I have a degree in special education. I thought when I was going into being a parent that I was good to go. Like, I was, and the Lord did have to humble me a little bit, and say, you do know a lot. And you have a lot of information up here, but now we have to play it out. And these kids are not going to always do it by the book, right? And so, and I learned that even with my two girls, my biological girls, I was like, oh, wait. And I remember saying to my mom one time, Mom, I read the book and this says the kid should be doing this and sleeping through the night. And then my mom said, well, she didn't read the book. I was like,
so wise.
Roger that, Mom. Yes. So then, I moved on, and then but I will tell you, when I first started to foster, and the children had needs that my girls never had, and that can start in infancy when I was taking care of little ones, a lot more crying, a lot more up at night. The attachment issues were there, and what I used to be able to do for my toddler or my preschooler or eventually elementary schooler, it didn't work. My parenting sack that had eventually worked for my two girls was not working. And I will never forget the day that one of the therapists, that we had therapists come to our home to work with our son. And I can't even remember if he was officially adopted at that point, but really isn't important. But when she left, I closed the door and I just slid down the door and cried. And I mean, cried. Because I knew that what they were doing, it wasn't her fault, but it wasn't working, right? It wasn't helping him in the way that he needed to be helped. And I was out of tricks. I was bringing in the professionals, and I thought, I need help. It doesn't matter that I have this advanced degree in education. It doesn't matter that I've read all these books. I need someone to help me. And I wasn't finding that help. We have since found amazing therapists, and we are so grateful for them. And we have found the right ones. And that's what I tell parents. You have to keep searching, right? You have to keep talking to people that are in the space that know. Maybe it's a parent that has a child a little bit older than yours. But you have to keep asking and keep talking and searching. And it is overwhelming. It is exhausting. But there are a lot of late night Googles, right? There's a lot of late night, this is what he's doing. This is what he's saying. But because a lot of what had happened to him had caused him to have outbursts. And I'm not talking your typical throw down, like kids fall on the ground. I'm not talking about that. I am talking about fights, like anger, bursts of anger that he was fighting me. So see, when my other kids would get mad, they might get frustrated, but they didn't fight me. I was their soft place to land. I was their, oh, Mom, I'm so mad about this, but you're going to hold me and I'll cry about it. Bo was like, I'm mad about this, and I'm mad at you too.
Right.
And you're a part of what I'm mad at. Because he wasn't able to differentiate that or vocalize that and communicate that to me. And so that made me feel, as a parent, like a failure. Because I want to be the place that my kids feel comforted and honored and close, and like when all the world is against you, your parents are for you, right? And so I had to really go back, and my husband, and we worked on, wait a minute, so this kid needs a different style of parenting. And if we don't choose to change the way we parent him, we will lose him. Because otherwise we are the enemy. And that he was making it very clear, I have me in this world, and that is all I have. And I'm talking about at 4 years old, he was making this clear. At 5 years old, he was making this clear. And that kind of makes sense. I'm not going to share a lot of the details of his beginnings, but it makes sense because of his beginnings, why he felt that just his brain had been created in a situation where it was like, I have me, and that's the only person I have in this world. Go ahead.
I think about this because you have biological kids, right? And I think about families that step into the fostering space that have biological kids. You have parented it a certain way, and then you pick up a child that's going to be placed in your home, and it's completely different. But you already have experience raising kids. For us, for my husband and I, we didn't have that, right? We had fostered a couple kids before our forever son came, but he had a huge list of medical issues. So our normal was from the very beginning. I knew that when the social worker called and said, hey, this kid needs a home to be in, a safe place to land, we were going to pick him up. But I knew already, because the social worker told me, this is what we know already about his case. And so we were just like, okay, this is our normal. It wasn't until, even now sometimes I have friends go, man, that must be really hard. And I go, it's just what you know. That's all I know. So I really want to, what I love about what this podcast is all about, and I've shared this with you guys, is that somebody that's listening doesn't feel isolated and alone. It's hard to go, I want to go to a support group, but then, you're going to have another person look over your kids, and then at the same time you're like, it's so much to juggle. So that is my hope, that people that are listening, they know that they're part of this community already.
100. Because there were times where I didn't want to go. There might have been childcare offered for a support group, or childcare offered at church, or childcare offered at different places, but my son wasn't ready for that.
Right.
He just wasn't, and he wasn't ready to be separated from us. He wasn't ready for. And when I say wasn't ready, this was years. This wasn't just like, oh, he's not ready because he just was placed with you. No. I'm talking about it took time. And we really had to work with him and with therapists. And we had to step back and acknowledge, okay, he should be able to do this at this age, but he can't. And that's okay.
Right.
And how can we navigate and support him? And I always want to say to those people that are listening, that are pulling their hair out, I was there. I am there on any given day some days, right? So it doesn't mean we're perfect now. It means it's gotten easier. It means we have more tools in our tool belt to be able to manage and know what he needs. But David and I, my husband, we still talk. We're like, what do you think about this? You think this will work? You think that'll work? And sometimes it's on the fly where David, I'm like, David can look at me. He's like, okay, she is done. I will be taking over right now, or vice versa. And not to say, listen, we love our son and he is amazing and he has made amazing changes. And where he is today is not a mirror image of where he was a year ago or 2 years, so much progress and continues to have. So much so that, his teachers today, when I sometimes prep the path, where I'm like, meet them for the, first parent-teacher conference, and I'm like, so let me just let you know his background a little bit. They're like, we don't see that child. We don't see that child.
Oh,
That's not
God.
who we teach. That's not who we have. And so I am thankful for that. And that is because I always say he's one of the hardest working kids. And I encourage parents, you have to drench your child in therapy, in good quality therapy that's working for them. But you have to be open and willing. That just wasn't, my kids, they didn't go to therapies, whether it was behavioral therapy, speech therapy, psych therapy, that just wasn't a part of their story. They didn't need that when they were his age. And so, but being open to that and being willing to provide that. And again, I know there's a whole financial piece to that and insurance and all the things, but fighting for it, getting it, making sure, you meet those needs, to me, that is huge and extremely important.
I'd say that's really true for the parents as well. And same thing applies. Every family comes with different unique challenges, whether it's finances or insurance or all those things. And yes, there's great support groups out there. And yes, you may have to do the work to find them in churches. I'm a pastor. I advocate for churches being a place where we should be ready and welcome to all these people who are hurting and vulnerable and need something and need someone, and let the church go first. Let us lead the way. But I think for us too, knowing that as we go through this journey, we've needed help as well. So as we take our kids to therapy, I think we want to give permission to those who are out there to say, you get good counselors and therapists too, because you have to then work through things as well.
Yes.
Just all the things you're talking about. I'm reflecting on a moment when one of our kids was 2.5 years old and we were playing ball. I love to play basketball. My kids, they're all very different. My two oldest kids are like incredible athletes and just love it. And I love sports. I love that. One of my kids is a super creative and I love that too. And I'm playing basketball and this little tiny kiddo is shooting hoops, and we had a social worker visit from Angels. This was wild. And our social worker comes in and everything's going well. I'm at the house and we're on the Nerf hoop and my kiddo starts missing shots. She's 2.5 years old, starts missing shots and has like a fit meltdown. And I'm like, I don't know what to do with this. It almost looked like I had been training her for the WNBA. And like
But
now the
you
social
were.
worker's coming and going, whoa. And I'm like, it's okay to miss shots. It's okay to miss shots. And just was in that moment thinking, I don't know. I don't have a tool in my tool belt to figure out how to do this. And watching it and feeling embarrassed and shame and thinking, this has never happened before, because the other thing about emotions sometimes is they just come out.
Right.
Like our kids had been with us for months at that point and we'd never seen this behavior. And all of a sudden, whatever it was, whether it was missing the shot or the social worker stepping into our home, whatever it was like boom. And it was like just frustration and anger and meltdown and throwing the Nerf basketball. And I'm going, oh, wow. Okay.
And it's overwhelming when they're 2.5, but I'll tell you when they're 4.5 or 5.5 or 7.5 or 9.5, and they're still having those meltdowns because often our kids from difficult places do.
Yeah.
It becomes less acceptable.
Yeah.
And you feel judged, and you don't want to be in the grocery store when that's happening. And you don't want people looking at you. You don't want the teacher writing home the note or whatever. And so I totally hear you. You were like at that like bug eye moment of what do I do? And I've been there too. And I've been there with an older child. And then I realized soon, as he was getting older and bigger, I'm not going to be able to pick him up and say we're going to sit here in timeout together or we're going to calm down. I'm not going to be able to physically move him anymore. And that's really when I started to be like, oh, wait, this isn't just something I can let go. I really need to find answers. I need to find therapists. I need to find interventions that will help me to help him. And I often say this, a lot of it is work for us.
Yeah.
It really is. Yeah. Because as we become better parents, as we become more understanding of the difficult places and the big baffling behaviors, I use that from Robin Goebel all the time, as we start to understand that, then we can parent them more effectively with calm. Because, when someone's exploding multiple times a day and having a lot of trouble, it's normal for you to be like, please stop doing that. Like, what are you doing? And like, it makes you get up to this level. Yeah. And if you're up here and they're up here, it is just gasoline it's going to be explosive. So I always say to parents, like, I get that feeling. And sometimes we have to really work on where we come and enter that moment. And it's not easy. I am not perfect. I have not always done it. I tell Lani that all the time. There are times where I, get frustrated and all of that. But the more you learn, the more you read, the more you talk with those that are in it, then you are able to parent in a different way and meet them where they are and be able to talk to them and bring them down. And as you stay calm, then they come around and are like, oh. And I often say it's kind of testing us in a way. Like, not that they are doing it on purpose, because I don't believe that. I don't think it's a choice. But it ultimately is a test of, will you still be here with me when I am at my worst?
Right.
When you see me and I am struggling, will you still be here with me and be for me? And the answer is yes. But as parents, we have to have tools, whether you are foster parent, whether you are an adoptive parent, whether you're a parent just taking care of a child for a respite period, you might see some of these behaviors and interactions, and I often say it's if they were bleeding or if they had a broken bone, you would not get frustrated with that, even if they were screaming.
Right,
that's good.
But they have these wounds or these issues that are behavioral or psychological in nature, and they're showing them. Yeah. And they're bleeding. So we have to sit and calmly, put the Band-Aid on and calmly help them and clean the wound and help them. And sometimes that means it's difficult for me, surprise, surprise, I don't need to talk. So God said, you talk enough in your life. I'm going to give you a son who doesn't want to hear your voice. At least in those moments. And it may be true for many children in those moments.
My kids say, Dad, I already know what you're going to say. You already told me that.
Yeah.
Right. I know what the Bible says. You tell me, I know, but I just need to be clear.
And I just appreciate, as someone who came into this so green, without experience, with a lot of naivete in me, that now we equip and empower the church with trauma-informed care.
That's right. I was
it is so important because when we're on these calls with these churches who want to get involved, we always discuss trauma. Yes. And we always show the image of the iceberg of what you see, the fruit that you're seeing. There is a deep root of trauma that's going along with it. They are not giving you a hard time. They are having a hard time. And that's something that only a trauma-informed volunteer can understand. And so when we are on these calls and we're equipping the churches, that we're saying, listen, there are so many layers, and we're giving you this much of the tools in your tool belt, so that when you see behaviors, there's an empathy there, there's an understanding there. Because what I've seen, especially in the beginning, is you'll have a well-meaning church volunteer who just says, I want to help kids. This is great. I want to go drop things off. But they're not well educated or they're not well equipped.
Right.
And so they'll step into a space and then they'll say something and they don't understand the hurt that they're causing with the words that they're saying that just come from not understanding the situation.
Oh, and let's be clear. Like, I mean, I think, we've all grown up in the church. And so, the church can be like this. Like children, need to behave in this way.
Yeah.
And so when you have a child that is outside of that behavioral kind of production that the church might want, and I don't mean that to be ugly about churches. That's just the way we were raised. I think there's been lots of change in church, and I think there's been lots of more understanding. But that's what we're talking about, is that just like you might see a child come in a wheelchair and need a ramp to get to the church,
Yes.
my child needed a ramp too. It just wasn't a physical ramp.
Right.
And I love that. I think, speaking to pastors in churches right now, I mean, big dream moment right now for R225, and something that doesn't quite exist yet, but does in some small pocket ways, where Emily and our team have been able to speak to churches and teams and volunteers. I do believe that there are a lot of families that have kids that have experienced these difficult situations, whether it's biological, kinship, foster, adoptive, on the precipice of, like, they're on the edge and they need somebody. And we believe that the church and Jesus is the hope of the world. But to your point, I think that we need more churches that have a greater understanding of how to serve those families. I think there's a lot of families that are missing out on great church experiences because the teams of those churches are well-meaning, loving people who, to your point, think kids have to act this way. Okay, everybody, we need to sit down. Hey, everybody, we need to do these things. Next. And I'm convicted as a pastor and thinking always, how can I train our church? How can I train our leaders? How can we be the kind of church that is a safe place, a loving environment for all these kids? I'm haunted by the words of a pastor that I met here in San Diego. And he said one time, because they're in an urban environment with a lot of really at-risk youth, and he said, Logan, I want you to know that every church in America could have a huge youth group. The problem is they don't want the kind of kids that we serve. And I was like, oh my word. That is completely opposite of the kind of person that Jesus was.
Right.
But he was speaking facts. He was speaking truth to say that churches aren't equipped. They're not ready. We want good kids.
Yeah.
And we don't say that, but oftentimes it's like when hard kids from hard places or circumstances or emotions arise or trauma bubbles up, maybe the church hasn't even thought of that. And we're thinking about that as Restoration 225. And how do we go to churches and speak to them in such a way to say, you have an incredible opportunity in your city, in your church, in your neighborhood. There's grandmas at this church right now that can't bring their grandkids because they'll misbehave. And that's okay. It's not okay to misbehave, but it's also okay to understand that there's more to the circumstance than maybe they realize. And how do we have some tools? And how do we have a plan that serves these kids and these families? Because the last thing in the world I would ever want as a Christian, and definitely as a pastor, is a family who has opened their home and who needs the church and who needs that community and who needs Jesus to not have a place to worship because there's not a church available for them to do so. And I'm like, how do we help? How do we help?
Right.
No,
Absolutely.
I have experienced that and I have worked through that, but I think it's something that until you have that child that has that need, and it can be, a biological child that has a special need too. So there's just, like what that pastor said, sometimes the child is not going to fit the mold in which we want, but also I don't want it to come back on the parents or the people that are raising that child. There's still a lot of shame that parents carry that their child can't behave in a certain way. But again, I always go back to they're having a hard time. They're not giving you a hard time. If they could do the task at hand, they would. When they're showing those big behaviors, there are reasons behind that. And so my hope with this podcast is to let those that are listening, caregivers listening, that we understand. We want to support you. We want to connect you with services and therapists and others that will help you in this journey. You are not alone, because that is how I felt. And I thought, if I feel alone, then and I chose this, right? I chose to foster, I chose to adopt. Like, I made conscious decisions to get myself in this position. A kinship grandma she chose to say yes, but that wasn't really in her plan. She wasn't thinking one day I will raise my grandchildren, or an auntie or an uncle or a cousin who steps in,
Or brother or sister.
or a brother
sibling.
or sister,
Yeah.
especially an
Yeah.
older brother or sister. That was not always their plan and their thought. And so they also don't realize that there are others that understand the great weight of that, and that it's not because they aren't being a good parent, because you will hear that so often, or at least that's what kind of gets the message is, you're not being a good parent. That's why the child's misbehaving. And that's not, most of the time, that is not the case.
Lani, you want to take it away here?
Yeah, I mean, we're coming to
I
a
know.
close. Look at us, just chatting. Surprise, surprise, right? I wanted to say, Nancy, for years, obviously we've been fostering for a long time, but I remember we always kind of go back to that first time we met at the foster agency where I said, hey, why don't you come over to my house? And you're like, I don't even have a placement. And what did I say to you?
She said, you're going to need us. Just come. You don't have to have a baby. You don't have to have a kid yet. And, just come. Because I thought, well, if I don't have a placement yet, I don't have a child, a foster child, why would I come? She's like, you are going to need us.
And we're going to need you. We need people around us to support us during the foster journey. What I want to say and what I want to ask you at the end of this episode is stepping in to R225 and now being an advocate for so many things. What is your hope? What is your hope for the volunteers, for the businesses, for the churches as R225 really takes maybe the next 5 years of just growing deeper in relationships within our churches and agencies?
It really is true that everybody can do something. So if you are a community member and you own your own business and you want to give back to the community and support these children, maybe it's a financial donation to Restoration 225, and we do the work, and provide the items that are needed. Maybe it is, I know we have a lovely collaboration with a mattress, company, and they donate mattresses because one of the great needs we have.
Shout out mattress makers.
That's
Mattress
right. I was about to say, yay. But there are so many businesses that probably could provide items or financial donations. Obviously, you always take those too. But so that's the community champions, right? And then you have churches and the people in the churches. We've spoken about that before in previous podcasts. Just what can you do? Where can you get involved? Do you want to lead a ministry at your church? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. Maybe you just want to buy diapers and wipes and donate that. Maybe there's some out there that are thinking about fostering and thinking about adoption, and there's just such a long continuum of ways to get involved. And as far as for Restoration 225, we have a website. I'll share it in a little bit. We would love to open the conversation. Maybe it's just having a conversation. Yeah. You just want to go to lunch with us or do a Zoom with us to find out how. I know there are vulnerable children in San Diego County. How can I help them?
I like tacos and Asian food. If anybody would like to invite us over,
Yes.
that would be great. But we love that. We say that often. We want to be relational, just not transactional, right? We just don't want to be transactional. We want to get to know, how do you want to be part of it? So is there anything in closing that we want to say?
That's really it. That's what's on my heart today. That's why I'm work with Restoration 24, Restoration 225, and I'm committed. I know that so many in so many churches want to be able to help. I know that. I know there are community members that want to be able to help, but they honestly don't know where to get started or how to do it. And there's nerves behind it. Jeannie Presley was on earlier, one of our great volunteers, and she's like, you get a little nervous. Should I do this? Or maybe I should do this, but I shouldn't ask others to help me. And I always say, don't steal the blessing from someone else.
That's right.
And so there are so many that can get involved, and it doesn't have to be all consuming. It's all you do. Look, if you want to make it that fantastic, we're not going to stop you. But I know that there are things that people can do on a daily basis, weekly basis, monthly basis. It could be every 3 months, could be every 6 months. It doesn't have to take over your life, but it means so much. And I thank you from the bottom of my little baby heart when I was starting out in my life that someone said, yeah, I think taking care of an infant that's not my own, I think I'll do that. And that changed the whole trajectory of my life. If I hadn't been cared for with such love in the first 3 months of my life, I can promise you I would be a different person. I would be a different person because the beginning of your life is so important to get that love. We all know that. I encourage anybody who's listening to, at the very least, go to our website, and I'll give it to you in a minute, and just how can I help? What could I do? And maybe it starts with just putting your toe in the water. And then eventually we'll push you in.
You know what? Before we close, Pastor, I know somebody is listening, and I would love if you could say a prayer over them. Maybe there's a caregiver that's listening, and they're like, "I'm drowning right now." We say that a lot. We get drowning calls sometimes from social workers saying, I don't know who else to call right now, but I heard about you guys. And so we are going to reach out to what we call our network of care to see who can help. But maybe, do you mind blessing us with a
let's pray.
Yeah. Okay, Father.
God, we come to you right now. We thank you for the opportunity to share our stories that are nothing more than seeds of grace, Lord, that you have given to us, and we're just sharing with others to plant hope. And wherever they're at right now, whatever they're walking through, whether it's a biological family that's just struggling in need of community or items, Lord, that keep them from crisis, Lord, or a kinship grandmother, Lord, who's well past retirement age, but now opening her home to little tiny infants because they have no other place to go and because she loves them so deeply, Lord, to the families who've said yes to fostering and the unique complexity that comes with that of loving a child that's not your own, but is like your own, and you don't know what's going to happen and you don't have control of their story, but all you can do is love them through all that they've been through, and you may not even know all they've been through. But Lord, I just pray that you would give strength to every single person that's listening here today and whatever they're at in this journey. I pray that we would see 1,400, 10% of our Christian churches in San Diego County say yes. We pray that that community champions would fund the mission, that would give back and support the work that we get to do as bridge builders in our city, in our community, through churches and agencies and partners, so that there's a web of care, a community of care, Lord, so that there's more than enough families that are saying yes to foster care and adoption. There's more than enough beds available for kids who are sleeping at night, Lord, more than enough spaces and homes for kids to rest in. Lord, there's so many resources in San Diego, but also so much need. And I pray that we would be at the center of making a difference in the lives of these kids and families, and ultimately point them towards you, Lord Jesus. I pray that people feel like they're not alone, that more churches would step into the story and say yes to recognizing the people in their seats, but in their city, and be the kind of church where they can find help and hope. And I just pray that more churches would learn about the work that we're doing so that we could be better together in serving here and for as long as you let us, Lord. It's in your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, brother.
All right, I'll take us out here. Yeah. Thank you guys for being on the podcast today. These are my friends, these are my colleagues, but they were also my interviewers today. So,
and thank you, Nancy.
Thank
really
you for sharing.
Yeah, from the bottom of my heart. I've known you a long time, and there's parts of your story I was like, oh, I haven't heard that part yet. So there's so much that came out of that. I really appreciate it.
Sure. No, thank you. Thank you. And we also want to thank Coastal Cast Studios for helping us record today and produce the podcast. If you want to get involved with Restoration 225 and get more information, even if you're just ready to put your little pinky toe in and not anything else, we will take that. But restoration225.org online, and also on Instagram, Facebook, and the socials is at Restoration225. And it is our sincere hope that you will join us in being the heart behind the help. Now, go care for one today.